Hello again. I sometimes struggle with the idea that I am, as a man, somehow responsible for all the unpleasant things which happen in the world. After all, I'm not actually starting wars or fighting in them, nor am I raping women. I've never done such a thing. I do not attack or oppress anybody, and I'm not in the least degree to blame for the fact that there are dysfunctional people in the world who do such things. I notice, though, that masculine has changed from being a desirable and praiseworthy quality to one of those things that you try and keep quiet about. The reason is that these days the word masculinity is almost invariably preceded by the adjective toxic. They seem to go together like a horse and carriage, to quote the old song. These days, masculine men are seen as a health hazard, toxic meaning none other than poisonous. I think that one of the reasons that I'm a little irritated by this is because all too often it is not masculinity at all which is at the root of the problem, but rather its lack. In other words, the difficulty is that there is too little masculinity, not too much. It is when children grow up without any experience of masculinity that the trouble starts. In other words, all too many children now are raised in homes where there is no model for decent and appropriate masculinity, and as a natural result they have to devise their own ideas of what constitutes masculinity. This leads to all kinds of problems, not the least of which are gun-toting gangs and illegitimate babies. Both boys and girls, particularly girls, need a father at home showing them how real men should behave. Demonstrating, in fact, what masculinity actually is. The problem is that unless youngsters see practical role models like this of men caring for their families, working to provide them and looking after their children, then they will turn elsewhere for their ideas on how men should behave. They will look at television and films or in real life. And this often tends to be young hoodlums whose exploits look to them really cool. This is all terrible because, of course, the images of masculine men in films do not generally show them going to work and taking their children to the seaside. Far more likely is that there will be soldiers, gangsters, cowboys, explorers, and other single men doing exciting and dangerous stuff. The real life examples of masculinity, which a lot of boys and girls with absent fathers see, are even worse. They're often violent and aggressive young males who will stab somebody over some fancied slight. We really don't want our sons and daughters getting their ideas of masculinity from either of these two sources. There has been a lot said about the difficulties encountered by boys with absent fathers, but for girls the situation is even worse. Girls growing up with absent fathers tend to do poorly at school, engage in sex at an earlier age, experiment with drink and drugs, and form fleeting and unstable sexual relationships. They're also more likely to end up in prison or psychiatric wards. I give a few references in the description to this video, but it does seem as though the first relationship which a girl has with a male, that is to say her father, is crucial to developing self-esteem, confidence, and a positive attitude towards other males. Daughters raised in single-parent households tend not to do as well at these things, and their life chances are adversely affected. Whichever aspect of life you look at, from depression to eating disorders, self-harm to the number of sexual partners in later life, children not raised with their fathers do more poorly than those in a traditional two-parent family. I happen to be, and I am sure it will come as no surprise at all to any viewers of this channel, a bit old-fashioned when it comes to ideas about families and masculinity. I do not think that masculinity is best expressed by pulling a trigger, throwing a punch, or knifing somebody. I believe rather that it is to be found in caring for a wife and children, and taking a very active role in the raising of one's children. A real man is one who works hard to ensure the safety and security of his family. It is this image of masculinity which I would like to see promoted, but as I said at the beginning, the very word itself is now suspect and very often confused with displays of macho violence. In society generally, and especially at school, masculine behaviour has come to be seen as a warning sign. Schools are very feminised environments now, and contests of strength or even competitive conduct of any kind is frowned upon. The aim is for boys to become more like girls, cooperating quietly and without any outward signs of boisterousness. This is a bad move, because if you repress such boyish behaviour in a safe setting like school, then it will manifest itself on the streets in unsupervised and possibly violent ways. My own opinion is that we need to reclaim masculinity and start letting young people know that there is a good deal more about it than simply having pissing competitions or attacking a man because you think he's looked at you in the wrong way and affronted your dignity. I'd like to see the old masculine virtues of chivalry towards women, a desire to protect the weak and vulnerable, and a determination to care for a family being held up to young people as worth emulating. Most particularly, I would like to see the end of single-parent families and a sharp reduction in blended families. The traditional family where a man works to support his wife and children has fallen from favour, but there can be no doubt that this is the kind of family in which children thrive best, and the one which makes it least likely that they will end up in prison, on the dole, or with illegitimate babies.